Welcome to the Truth About Employed Physicians podcast, a weekly show where we take you behind the scenes of the professional healthcare industry and reveal the little-known methods highly successful physicians, doctors, and professionals are executing right now to maximize their income, reduce their financial liabilities, and most importantly, regain the freedom to live their lives on their terms. Subscribe to the Truth About Employed Physicians podcast today so you don't miss a single episode of this highly valuable information from our host, a veteran physician with more than 20 years in practice and counting. Now, your host, Dr. Incorporated.
Hey everybody, this is Dr. Incorporated bringing another episode of The Truth About Employed Physicians. I'm excited to just get back from delivering a baby this afternoon. Man, I love delivering babies. As a family doc, it's one of the great joys that I have of bringing a baby into the world. And this is the first time mom and dad, and just to see, all the 9 months that kind of build up into that process and then is culminated in the birth of that child, and just the joy, really the unparalleled joy that comes out of that, and just getting to be in that role as a physician, as a family doc, I get to take care of both mom and baby. I love it. And I hope there are things that happened in your work week this week that are just like that are just those moments when you're like, this is why I wanted to be a doctor. This is why I do this thing every day. And I know I'm grateful for that. And I hope your week has brought forth some items like that have just made you feel good about being a doctor. And so we're going to pick up a conversation today that we've been talking with my son, John, about elements associated with a young doctor's life. And today, we're going to talk about something that's a little bit odd in the context of the young doctor's life, because we're going to talk about the retired life. And you kind of might say to yourself, what in the world are we doing talking to a medical student about the retired life, okay? And I want to start by saying, for many of you out there listening, this will not seem like an odd conversation because many of you have thought through this on really various levels. But I really think that terminology, retired life, is probably not the best terminology. So I've reflected on this. I feel like retirement has been often framed in our culture as sort of an age, a time that is very chronologically connected to most commonly 65, because that's when Social Security can kind of kick in for a lot of people. Sometimes they delay it further, but most people kind of frame retirement as this working into their mid-60s until Social Security kicks in, and that's when it happens. And there's a whole bunch of financial structures that are kind of built in and around that. And if you're really lucky, you might be able to, quote, retire early in your early 60s and so forth. And so that's kind of the typical way that people look at retirement. It's more age-based when you hit this sort of certain age. But I really think for physicians, high-income earners, and others in our country, we're beginning to think differently about retirement, not just as an age, a chronological age, but really beginning to think about it as sort of autonomy and opportunity. And so it kind of is that magical point where you have reached financial independence in such a way that the money you've put aside can pay for the lifestyle you want to live in the future, and you really don't have to work any longer to live that lifestyle. And in many regards, that's kind of what retirement is or will be. And what we're seeing nowadays, right, John, is this movement towards financial independence and, quote, retire early, meaning retire before age 65. Do any of your peer medical students talk about FIRE or any of that kind of stuff?
No.
They don't? No. All right. So no. Do you think about it?
Definitely.
You do?
Yeah.
So you're another outlier when it comes to this conversation.
Yeah, it seems like I'm just an outlier.
You kind of are. I know. You're a little bit unusual in that way. And I know you didn't learn it from me, because it's really been in the most recent years that I've really thought a little more intentionally about this. I like most doctors, I just had no great awareness about retirement. Thought I would just work, make a lot of money, and eventually, retirement sort of take care of itself. But you're a little bit different.
Yeah.
And one of the key elements associated with retirement, listeners, that I want you to keep in mind is to really retire well, you always have to start with the end in mind. And so Tell me a little bit about what that looks like for you as a almost fourth year medical student.
Yeah, I think a good thing to think, I like that phrase, start with the end in mind, because that's important because you could almost view life as a race, right? And you need to know at the start, if you want to end up somewhere, where do you want to end up in the end, right?
Yeah.
How long do you want to take to get there? What's the process? But ultimately, where do you want to be in the end? And so you need to be able to plan for that. And so for me, I think that I would say I've started with the end in mind because I would like to have all the options that the financial freedom provides in the future. Right? I'm willing to put in the work on the front end in order to create that future for myself. Right? And basically, by doing that, by starting with the end in mind, you can move that finish line up by multiple years.
Okay.
Right? So most people, right, like 65 might be when they're financially, they retire maybe, or financially
So the government pays them to retire, so to speak.
Instead, you should think, when can I pay myself to retire? How can I manage my money in order to pay myself to retire? And then eventually at some point in time, I'll hit 65 and get that government bonus check and every month. But I've put enough away, managed my money in such a way that I can pay myself and sort of buy myself extra years to do other things that I want to do with them. And so for some people, they want to, even if you want to practice medicine full time till you're 65, I think it's still valuable to have that financial independence because you never know what's going to happen in the future, whether it's an injury, whether it's a change in hospital administration, networks, EMRs, a lawsuit. Like, you never know what's going to happen in your life that might derail that. And so it's better to be prepared for those potential scenarios by being financially responsible. So I'm thinking about those things in advance as a medical student, which is uncommon.
Yes, it is.
Not many of my peers.
Because you're not making any money right now.
I'm not making any money, but
your wife does. And so that probably makes you think about it.
There's a saying that luck favors the prepared.
Okay.
Right? And so the good things sort of come to people who are prepared.
Yeah.
Right? And so the more preparation that you can do on the front end, the more likely you are to have sort of favorable outcomes over the course of your life. And so preparing financially on the front end, thinking about those things, that includes, and it's really just a lot of math. So to me, it just makes sense because of the numbers. It's not just, I wishy-washy, I want to do this or that. It's, I look at the numbers and say that this is where I want to be. So for example, this is the amount of money that I want to be able to spend every year. And so I can calculate out then how much money would I need to have and how much, and how much would I be withdrawing from that in order to spend that amount per year. And that could be, if I want to maximize, if I want to be fully not working, not bringing any income, then that number is going to be higher. But you can also think of it more reasonably as, well, maybe I just want to go to 60%, a 60% schedule, right? And so, but I want to make up that 40% of my income somewhere. So I can have prepared financially for that in advance to where I am not missing any of that income that I'd like to be spending. Say that's $100,000 a year that I want to be spending, right? Well, I can have 60,000 of it that I know is going to come from my income, but where do I make up the other 40, right? Well, I can prepare in advance that, do a little bit of math and figure out that I probably need, about $1 million in order to, that are saved away, that's invested in order to make up that $40,000 a year. That's because there's a, commonly known rule that's based on some mathematical principles. You should be able to withdraw about 4% per year from a retirement or savings account that's invested in a relatively conservative fashion, and you should be able to outlive your money.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, that was based on the Trinity study, yes.
And so I think keeping that in mind, I think it's all about the flexibility of where do you want. I want to have a flexible future.
Yep. Yeah, and I think, first of all, congratulations on being an outlier when it comes to your medical school peers in regards to that. That's a very powerful notion because if you do have an awareness about that, even now, you're going to be more likely to arrive there faster. And so I'm thankful this past, it's been about 12 months now that your mom and I realized that we reached that point of financial independence. We hit that magical plateau where I knew I no longer had to work. I could stop working now and we'd be totally fine. Be able to live the lifestyle we wanted to, and we've been really good savers over the years, trying to pay down debt. But I can tell you, it's not until the last many years that I really began to understand all the mechanics involved in sort of determining that process, and to know that we are financially independent. Now, I plan to work probably for another 5 to 10 years, although I just told your mom today that some days I begin to wonder about that, if I might retire even a little bit earlier, because I can. And it feels good when you have all of a sudden you regain the control and autonomy over your life to decide, I don't have to work, or if work is becoming too burdensome, I can cut back to less hours or stop altogether. There's a great freedom that comes in that. And so it's a very powerful notion. It's all about options and opportunity, I think, that comes out of that. But one of the key things that allows me to know that we've arrived at financial independence is we know what our net worth is. And it's hard to know if you've arrived at financial independence without knowing what your net worth is. I assume you know what your net worth is.
Yes.
Okay. And how are you so smart to figure that out?
I graduated from high school.
Okay, what do you mean by that? Okay, what? So smarty pants, all right.
So I just take all of the assets that we have, and I subtract out what are called our liabilities or our debts. So that includes credit card debt, car loan, medical school debt. The only debt that we have is medical school debt. We don't carry a car loan or credit card debt. And so take those numbers and put them together and figure out what your net worth is from that. For most medical students, that's going to be a pretty large negative number.
Yes, it is.
And surprisingly, for a lot of doctors who are in practice, it's also a large negative number.
That is true as well.
And that's what we're about to discuss. That's what a lot of doctors don't realize, is their net worth is negative. They might have this big house or this car or high income, but they're still paying off medical school loans from 15 years ago that they never took care of. And they took out $1 million loan on this house, and the
mounting consumer debt. Credit card bills, extra.
Yeah, and all those things count into your net worth. It's how many assets do you have minus your debts.
Yeah.
It's a simple math.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so it's simple on one hand, but it requires a little bit of effort on another hand to be able to track it and get your mind wrapped around it, right? Mm-hmm. You must be lucky to be married to an accountant. I bet she really helps with that, doesn't she?
Yeah, she definitely helps with that. I think I'm probably the more... I really enjoy financial topics and personal finance, and so I do a lot of the tracking of it. She does, since she's an accountant, she deals with numbers and financial things all day, and so when she's done with work, she doesn't really want to deal with that. She knows how she could do it all easily, but she lets me do that because that's what I enjoy doing, and she wants a break from it when she has her free time.
Yeah, so I think that there are a lot of young physicians out there, many of you listening to this podcast, who probably have contemplated that FIRE movement, the idea of retiring early, not working all of your life as a doctor. And I think that's okay. That's a big change for me. Like, for me as a baby boomer doctor, my whole identity has been wrapped up in being a doctor. And it's just been the more recent years that I've moved into a more comfortable place of looking at myself and beginning to see my identity as being separated from being a doctor, and therefore that gives me the freedom to feel like I can retire if I need to, and if I want to. I don't have to, but if I want to. And but a lot of doctors have that same struggle. I think their identity is so wrapped up in being the doctor that they can't imagine a life where they weren't the doctor. That they were simply sort of retired and their identity was wrapped up more in relationships or in community or in travel or experiences or children or charity work or what have you. You name it, all kinds of things. They have a hard time beginning to think through that. Have you thought through some of those things yourself? Like, is medicine your whole gig? Or is there more to it?
I think it's important to have more than just medicine. I think balance. I think having different interests and different things that you engage in are really important, and it helps prevent you from having your identity wrapped up in any one thing, right? Because if a lot of it's related to how much time you spend. And the reality is you're probably still going to spend most of your time in medicine, but in those hours, those sort of flexible hours in your days and your weeks and your months, the decision of how do you spend those hours says a lot, right? So are you going to do an extra couple surgical cases, or add on another 3 patients to the end of the day schedule? Or are you going to go fishing? Are you going to go for a walk with your wife in the evenings? Are you going to go play a pickup basketball game every week with your buddies? Are you going to have a small side business that you start, or a large side business that you start? But I think having those other things that it helps you to draw the line where medicine doesn't become your entire identity.
Yeah, right.
Right. It helps kind of draw that line in the sand of, yes, I'm going to spend time doing all this, but I also am going to choose these other things over medicine. And every time that you choose those other things over medicine, it helps solidify even more that medicine is part of your identity, but it's not everything. And I think that is huge.
It seems very, I don't know what the right word is, but it almost seems to encroach on the ethos of doctorhood. When we sort of took our oath, in my day it was the Hippocratic Oath, took the Hippocratic Oath, it was almost as though I was signing up for life. And if I ever turned my back on it to do something different than medicine, I was a traitor. And it's hard for me to emotionally get my mind wrapped around it. But you don't see medicine in that way. You see medicine as a great career, a great job, high income, right? But you see it as more of a pathway to something else, or what?
I don't know. I think it's a combination. I think that it is a good career and a good income. And a lot of people get into medicine because they want to be able to help others, right? It's a great way to contribute to humanity as a whole and take care of people in need. People are sick and dying and in need of comfort. And so I think you can add a lot of value to the world through that. But I think there's a lot of other ways that I can also add value to the world, right? Not just medicine.
It's true.
And so I think that's okay. It's okay to not only add value to the world in one way. And I think that's a big shift between your generation and my generation and the generations behind the people behind me, is we have a little bit more of an awareness of we don't have to only add value in one. We don't have to ultra specialize. We can be good at multiple things and contribute in multiple ways, and that's okay, right? And we're not the only one who can help, right? So I might, if I do orthopedic surgery, sure, I mean, the goal is I'm a good surgeon and I can do, different surgeries, replace knees, do trauma, do all those things. But the reality is if I'm not there, there's going to be someone else who's going to fill that spot and take care of those people, right? And
that's right.
While there, I can do my time, but then during the rest of the time, I can be contributing to the world in other ways.
That's right.
And contributing to myself, right? Taking care of myself. If you are only operating at 60% of your best, that's not very good, right? And so by allowing myself to be involved in different areas that will allow me to operate at 100%. When I'm doing medicine, I'm 100% engaged and energized and giving it my all. But I'm able to do that because I have another outlet where the other time I'm not just doing medicine. Right? I can be doing something else that gives me energy, and I can add value in a different way. And so that allows me to be all in multiple things kind of at the same time, because all in isn't necessarily calculated just based on the number of hours that you put in. Right. It's also the quality of the hours that you put in.
I kind of agree with that. So at the end of the day, though, to be able to reach that point where you have the autonomy, the opportunity, the options to do those things does require you to sort of amass a certain net worth, that kind of nest egg, or that magic number. And if you were to fully retire and not work anymore, live a lifestyle that most doctors would live, let's say on $130,000, $140,000 a year, kind of just as your operating expense of life. that comes out to about, and it depends on the person, but $2.5 to $3.5 million in terms of what that total number would be. That's a good amount of money. That's a good amount of resources. And it takes a lot to get there. Like most doctors are not going to arrive there in the first 3 to 5 years, right? Mm-hmm. It requires an intentional process of building blocks that lead to that. Some of those building blocks includes being a saver and removing debt, not taking on new debt, and also being wise about your retirement funds through your employer. Those are all kinds of elements that are involved in getting to that $3 to $3.5 million range. And, for you, that number may be even higher by the time you get to that point than it is for me right now. And really, it could be less than that, too, by the way, just for you listeners. If you want to live a more modest lifestyle, it could be much less than that, actually. It just depends on the lifestyle you want to live. I know some doctors that have retired on much less than that and are pretty satisfied with it. But one of the things I want to mention to you that are really important, I think, to young doctors when it comes to this area of retirement and retirement funding, though, on that idea of net worth, is this, and it's not often talked about. That is, most of you are choosing to be employed, which is a very common path for the safe harbor of being a good doctor nowadays. I think that's a wise path. That's why you're an employed physician. But I want you to know your employer's retirement program has caps on it that are set by the federal government under some rules called ERISA. And under ERISA, you can only put a maximum amount of the federally determined funds that you and your employer can put into your retirement account each year. And I used to live under the notion that that was going to be enough for me to retire on. I figured if the government set that mark and my employer maximized it, that if I put all my money in there that I could, that was going to be enough because, well, gosh, you'd think it would be enough. But what I came to realize was that bottom line is that if I depended on that solely as my source of retirement, it would only get me about halfway there. About 50% or so of the needs that I just talked about would come from my employer's retirement plan. So there are significant shortfalls if you're depending on your employer's retirement plan that I encourage you to think proactively about to build alternative or additional retirement funding elements that allow you to reach that goal. That could be taxable accounts, that could be side gigs, that could be another business, that could be all kinds of things. But my point is, don't just depend on your company's retirement plan, your employer's retirement plan, that is, to meet those needs. I know when I made that conversion to becoming my own professional corporation and kind of reorganized my contract around an employment-like contract, it unlocked all kinds of doors for me to be able to increase my retirement funding through a cash balance plan and some other qualified plans that allow me to put a whole lot more money in retirement than the ERISA caps had been allowed for under my prior employment agreement. So there's a lot of ways to look at this. There's a lot of opportunities for you. At the end of the day, you got to save. You got to have some fiscal discipline in your personal finances. And you got to get rid of debt, right? Eliminate debt.
Track net worth.
Yep. And all those things add up to tracking your net worth and watching it grow, hopefully every year for you. Because quite honestly, if you don't, you're going to run the risk of your finances actually being one factor that keeps you from retiring because you didn't manage your personal finances well, because you're unaware of your net worth. And I actually have a physician in our community who had to work into his late 70s because he did not manage his finances well. And it was really sad to me to see this older family doctor not working because of the love of taking care of patients. It's solely because he had to keep working to pay the bills to be able to retire. And the poor man eventually had a stroke. And it nearly killed him because he was working way later in life than he should have. And really it came down to he was not a great personal financial person. And I think a lot of doctors find themselves in those positions. And it's really, really sad. And it doesn't have to be that way, right? And so So estimating that nest egg is kind of a little bit of a challenge. Have you found that to be challenging for you, though, is figuring out how much you might need? Or have you and your wife even talked about a specific number?
I think that it's something that's kind of flexible. We have a general idea in mind of what we want, but changes over time as your spending changes, your life changes, what you care about changes, what you don't care about changes. So I think that's flexible, but I think it's important to know that number and be working towards that. Because if you end up needing less than that, well, that's great. You have extra money you can live with, or you can give to important causes. And if my mindset is always shoot for the highest bar that you need to reach in order to do something. And if you end up doing something that's less than that bar, well, good. I mean, you're prepared and you're ready to, you've already done what it takes to get to that, take care of anything underneath that high bar.
Right.
So, yeah.
So you don't think it's a betrayal of your calling as a doctor to consider retiring early?
I don't think so. Nope.
You feel totally good about that?
Yeah. And
kind of plan to. I get the impression you kind of plan to retire earlier.
Probably decrease schedule in order to maximize other personal interests.
Yeah. This is such an important topic. I've read some books. One, I think, was called The Millionaire Next Door, in which they basically sadly said that doctors who are among the highest income or high income earners in the United States are among the worst accumulators of wealth among all high income earners, because we tend to consume it, I guess, is we tend to be bad money managers. We tend to be financially illiterate. And I'm not saying these bad terms to you because it's trying to be disparaging to you as doctors, but the truth is that we do make a good income, and there should be no reason that we should not be able to accumulate these resources with just a little bit of effort in terms of our personal finances, right?
Yep.
Yeah, and that even begins while you're in medical school as you begin to think about this. Even though your net worth is probably negative, and some people don't know how negative it is, but it's the true fact. But once you get into residency, you can start to knock that down a little bit. And so it's a whole process. I know this, listeners, I'm excited about being financially independent. I'm excited about the prospects of retirement in the future. And not so much because I'm burnt out or tired of medicine, but just because the autonomy, the options, and the freedoms that come through really enjoying things that are broader and bigger than medicine. So I hope you are able to provide some of your own insights into retirement, your own ideas about what you think retirement means, whether it's an age or an idea or a philosophy, and really what you're doing or the steps you're taking to make sure that you reach retirement. Again, a warning, don't depend on your employer's plan to be your sole source of retirement funding, because it will leave you short and you need an alternative plan to think about it. And also, the closing thought is make sure you know what your net worth is. As John said, he learned that apparently in high school. I missed that high school class, but it is that simple that you can do. High school math. It's high school math. It wasn't a class. It was high school math. But it does take a little bit of effort to do it, but I encourage you to do that. And if you do, you're going to put yourself ahead of your peers and begin to really have a mark that you can reach for, which is important. So hope you have a great week at your home, a great week with your family, and a great week maybe figuring out what your net worth is. Take care.